Hey, Varun, this is Hussain. I think you're on mute. Should we start?
I'm so saying.
Hey, Varun, this is Hussain. You're on mute.
Yes. Okay, I can hear you now. Sorry, I was in my camera was off. Okay, so everybody who has joined in, we have a lot of participants. We are 32 at the moment, but we had 90 registrations. So I hope more will be joining in later on throughout the discussion, throughout this speech, throughout this session as well. So you're joining with the IIT Alumni Relations Offices, the newest and one of the most profound beginnings that we have initiated at IIT. This is the Wanna Know About webinar series, which is about a number of topics. We don't limit to just one topic or to just one side of what we want to know, but we just want to know about everything. And that's why specifically why it's called Want to Know About, so we can divest our weave on everything else that we want to showcase to you from different corners of the world, from different personalities and different perspectives when it comes to different topics. Right, so today on the Want to Know About webinar series, we'll be speaking about cloud computing, something that's very cutting edge and that has been quite sought after, that is also being integrated and being developed and also being applied to a number of other technologies. So that technology can be also portable, mobilized, as well as being accessed from anywhere in the world, and also made everything quite faster and cheaper to run as well. So that's just a brief about what today's discussion is going to be about. So before we begin, I would like to wish all of you, because I don't think you have heard from us, a happy new year. So because this is the first webinar we are conducting from IIT Alumni Association on behalf of the entire IIT Association and also IIT Informatics Technology, and as well as the association. We would like to wish you a massively successful 2021. So welcome on board. And if I tell you a bit of a brief about Mr. Hussain Shabbir, he is a giant in this industry, in IT, because he's connected to one of the most profound companies in Sri Lanka, bringing you all these technologies and also today to enlighten you and to share his knowledge with you. So if I tell you about a bit of him, he is currently a director at Virtusa, and the global head of their AWS Cloud Center of Excellence. Prior to this, Hussain led a startup called Aternium Lanka as the Chief Technology Officer, CTO, as we know, and head of operations, where he formulated the technical vision and strategy for advancing the state of practice in the engineering of software services and productions in the company. And he is the vice president of the SL Software Testing Board, has been a member of many IT councils and associations in Sri Lanka, like SLASCOM, AMCHAM, AmCham, I would say, FIDIS Software Chapter, and IRCCI, and plays the key roles in certain social service organizations as well. He is an IT professional with vast experience in cloud technologies, developing missions, critical applications, and business operations management, both in the USA and Sri Lanka as well. Apart from being an alumnus of IIT, Hussain has also been a visiting guest lecturer at a couple of universities, including IIT, and takes pride in sharing his knowledge with the budding technologists of today. Indeed, that is quite true. So that's a briefing about today's speaker, and we are more than happy to have you on board, Mr. Shabbir, because today we have all these participants to just be ready to listen to you and to absorb whatever that you have to share with them today. So, Mr. Shabbir, and also thank you everyone for taking part today. And also, Mr. Shabbir, it's up to you now to take the virtual podium and speak to us on cloud computing.
Thanks a lot, Varuna. Varuna, am I audible? Is it clear?
Yes, loud and clear. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And I think you may have to enable screen share for me as well.
I will. Yes.
Thank you. So thanks everyone for joining, and Happy New Year as well, like Varuna mentioned. And Varuna, thanks for that humble introduction. I would just quickly start off by saying that the title itself, isn't the cloud just awesome? Has that AWS flavor to it, but having said that, a lot of these concepts generally kind of go across the other cloud providers as well. However, in my current role, I'm focusing a lot on AWS. I will just touch upon that area and focus on AWS specifically. But then if there's anything else that we want to discuss later on, we can do that. Varuna, is the screen share enabled now?
Yeah, it is able.
Okay. So just let me know once you can see my screen.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Perfect. Thanks. Okay, so very quickly in terms of what we will cover today, so just wanted to understand, what is the definition of cloud, why cloud is so popular these days. It has been popular for some time now. How can cloud help you as an individual? We know a lot of the participants are going to be current students of IIT, students who have graduated recently from IIT, and then also maybe some people who are interested in cloud and AWS from the overall IT industry. So we will just touch upon how cloud can help you as an individual, and then how you can specialize in AWS cloud as a career, and then we will probably end up with the Q&A at the end. Individuals can, so that they don't forget, they can, type the questions in the chat window as well, and we will take that up in the Q&A at the end. And then of course, people can unmute themselves and ask the questions at the end as well. So having said that, what is cloud exactly, right? So, I think a lot of people might probably know this in general, but from a definition standpoint, and this is kind of a definition that AWS provides, but it's basically on-demand delivery of resources over the internet, where you have to pay only based on your usage. So you don't procure, you don't buy hardware and infrastructure. You basically rent out or lease for a particular period of time. And of course, different providers have different pricing models and so on. But that is kind of at a high level where you don't physically own that infrastructure. You just rent or lease that infrastructure for a particular amount of time. And of course, that time can be a long-term duration as well. And then what about the features of cloud computing, right? So uh, multi-tenancy, basically what that means is there are a series or a suite of servers, and each server may have multiple customers using that server. So it is shared infrastructure. Certain providers also provide dedicated service servers and so on. But in general, it is multi-tenancy. But however, they ensure based on the underlying uh, services that they have, that other customers cannot access your servers and your information from a security standpoint. So even though it is shared to a certain extent, no one has access to other people's data. Now, scalability and elasticity is something that we generally look at, and is a little bit confused as well in terms of what is scalable and what is elastic, because they sound very familiar and similar. So scalability generally means that when you have successful growing systems, you often see an increase in demand over time, right? So sometimes, for example, during Christmas, e-commerce site will see a high surge in their usage and so on. So system that is scalable can adapt to meet this new level of demand is what we call scalability. So that it is designed and architected in a way that it can scale over a period of time. And then from an elasticity standpoint, the ability to acquire resources as and when you need them, and release resources when you no longer need them. So after your Christmas peak usage in terms of your demand, January, maybe your server usage comes down again, and therefore you can release those resources. You no longer need 10 servers. You can go down to back to 2 servers. So in the cloud, this is something that would happen automatically based on how you have configured it. So that is kind of at a high level, the scalability and the elasticity kind of concept. Now, pay as you go, like I mentioned, you only pay for the amount of usage. For example, if you want 5 servers, you don't, and let's say each server costs $1,000 to procure, just as an example. outright. You don't pay 5,000. You pay it by the hour, in some cases by the second, and each usage, for example, in terms of AWS servers, the EC2 instances that are available, if you shut it down without destroying it, or what they call without terminating, you still don't pay for it. You just pay for it only when it's running. So that gives you the advantage, especially for startups and so on, where they don't have to invest a lot of money upfront when it comes to hardware and infrastructure procurement. They will definitely need all these hardware, the storage, the compute, the databases, but you don't have to spend a lot of money upfront, what is called as CapEx, capital expenditure. You procure the infrastructure in a pay-as-you-go format, and you pay in terms of OpEx, operational expenditure, which is a monthly kind of payment. And then self-provisioning is basically what we spoke of earlier, where you can provision the infrastructure the way you want. So you want 3 servers today, you provision 3 servers. You want another 10 servers 2 weeks later, you can do that on your own. So in terms of cloud computing itself, from a current context, it has been one of the mini waves that we have seen as far as the information age goes. So as you can see here in the diagram, we start off with in the 60s and 70s, where the mainframe came, the mini computers came later on, PCs became prevalent in the 80s and the 90s. And then the enterprise kind of servers came in with the client server, the IP networks, mobile, and then of course the AWS and other cloud computing providers came closer towards the 2000s, right after 2000. So a lot of this cloud computing can potentially be looked at as the next step after the internet. Now, even for example, this particular session that we are having now, this webinar would have been a seminar if it was in person, right? But because of cloud and the infrastructure and the technology that is available, we can do this from anywhere, potentially from anywhere. Now, and then similarly, there are certain services that have been not tagged as cloud previously, but have been around as soon as the internet was born, basically. So, for example, I remember when I created my first Hotmail account back in, I think it was 1997. Um, that was an email service that was provided for individuals to go and sign up and create an email account on the internet, right, by the Hotmail company. Now, if you before that, if you wanted to set up an email service, you had to procure some hardware. You had to set up the DNS, have it in your company data center, and so on. But after the internet came in, that particular service was now hosted by someone else and then provided to you at that particular moment for a particular fee. In some cases, like for example, for end users in Hotmail, it was free. So the birth of cloud is not very clear. It's not always when AWS started their business, or when Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud started their business. It can go even beyond that, predominantly as soon as the internet was born. And as a lot of you may know already, there are kind of 3 levels of cloud. There is the infrastructure as a service at the bottom, which is the underlying hardware, your servers, your compute, your storage, your networking, your databases. Then you have your platform as a service, and then you have your software as a service. So when it comes to infrastructure as a service, a lot of the major cloud providers offer that by default, your AWS, GCP, Azure. Platform as a service has different kind of aspects to it. So each vendor provides certain components of a platform. And what platform as a service basically means is that you get a platform where you can use components of that to create a software or a system or a solution which can be used by end users. So for example, AWS has Amplify, Lambda functions, API gateway. For queuing service, they have SQS. For databases, they have RDS. For storage, they have S3. And then you can use these components and create your application. Similarly, there are other providers, like for example, Zoho has this Zoho Creator service, where you can use certain components from them, come up and create an application of your own. And then you go one step above where you have your software as a service, which is basically that you don't have to create the software. The software is already there, and you will be a user of their service. So, all the productivity solutions out there, like Google Workspace, which is used to be called G Suite earlier, where you have your email, your docs, your sheets, your slides, your Drive, your Meet, all of that. Even certain accounting packages like QuickBooks and so on now are available online. You create an account and you start using it. So that's a software as a service. So another view of these three layers, and of course the private cloud is the layer where you have your cloud in-house in your data center itself, which is either a private cloud, so to speak, or your traditional on-premise data center. This shows you what the customer is responsible for each of those type of um, services, or what the provider is responsible for. So, for example, when it comes to the private cloud, you as a customer are responsible for everything from the networking, storage, servers, OS, data, and applications. And as you move along, the level of um, control that you have starts reducing, and the level of things that you can maintain or you need to maintain also starts reducing. So you have less control and less flexibility, which in a lot of cases is not an issue. But also you don't have to worry about managing this physical environment, the servers, the patching, and all of that. So if to take a simple example, right? How can we understand this a little bit better? So if you look at private cloud on premise, and let's take cooking as an example, right? So when you're cooking food at home, you use your own ingredients, you use your own utensils, and you are the cook, right? So you're cooking yourself. Infrastructure as a service is one step above, where, for example, the ingredients are provided to you and sent to you at your home, and you can cook them at home the way you like using your utensils and you as a cook, but the ingredients come from someone else. So I think recently the Sizzle restaurant has this option where they call it the Sizzle at home, where they send you the beef sirloin steak pack with the pepper sauce, right? But you have to cook it on your own using your utensils. So ingredients now come from someone else. You pay for it, get the ingredients, but the utensils are still yours, and you're obviously the cook. And then when you go one step above for platform as a service, it's kind of almost like a rent a kitchen kind of scenario, right? So, or even let's say a cookery class that you can attend. So you are still the cook, you still have to do the cooking, but they provide you with the utensils and the ingredients. And then finally, the software as a service is, where everything is done completely by others. And that is where, when you're eating at a restaurant or you get home delivery, which is more prevalent these days, you don't cook, you don't use any utensils, ingredients, everything is done by the provider, and then you just have to consume it. So this is just kind of a simple example to understand the various things that kind of at the various levels and various control and so on that you have. So for example, if you want more control on what ingredients to use, then obviously you need to cook at home. But if that is not a problem, you just want a quick and very quick meal, you just do a SaaS model and get it delivered at home, right? So that is kind of analogy from a real world example. So let's go to the next section, which is about why cloud is so popular these days. Now, from an enterprise standpoint, um, of course, cloud is prevalent for end users and so on as well. But from an enterprise standpoint, a lot of us as individuals will start looking at why, how we consume cloud and how we create um, applications and solutions and systems on the cloud. There are three main areas of what companies would look at potentially to improve, and cloud computing can help in that level. So reducing your costs, like I said earlier, you don't have to spend upfront. But not only that, when you look at the long run, it's almost like a retail versus wholesale solution, right? So when you buy one item, let's say you want to buy one server, it'll cost you an X number. But if you buy, let's say, 1,000 servers, that vendor will give that 1,000 servers to you at a much lesser cost than the one server. And that is basically what companies like AWS and GCP and Azure do, is they buy in very bulk and large scale, known as economies of scale, and therefore they can give those services and infrastructure to us at a much lower cost than if we were to just buy that hardware, and that is how the cost is reduced. Of course, that is not the only reason why a lot of companies are moving to the cloud. Nowadays, they are also looking at a lot of flexibility. For example, if you are to order a high-end server now, it can anywhere take between 2 to 4 weeks, maybe even longer, depending on the current restrictions that we have. Uh, and sometimes if it's a big order, it can take months because it needs to be shipped and so on from another country. In the cloud, you can have it almost within the day, the similar infrastructure available to you almost within the day. So the agility and flexibility of procuring infrastructure much more faster helps companies start uh, their go-to market in a much more faster way, and of course from with a lot less cost. And from a cost standpoint, the other angle is to reduce the maintenance overhead. So like I said, there are certain components, like for example, if you take the RDS solution, which is a database as a service solution from AWS, they do all the patch management of the database, the backups. You just have to tell them what timing that you need that backups to happen, and all that happens in an automated fashion in the background. So you don't need to worry about employing, DBAs and so on. That happens in that manner. Of course, there's a slightly higher cost compared to the traditional, um, just normal server cost, but then you eliminate a lot of the work that would happen in that context. So overall, when you look at the total cost of ownership or the return on investment, it is much more lesser. Scalability we spoke of earlier also, where people and companies can scale much more faster and quickly. And of course, from a security standpoint also, which is a question that keeps coming up in terms of cloud, is the cloud more secure or less secure than hosting your applications on-prem? And what we have seen is in on average and in the long run, the cloud is much more secure than having it on-prem. But of course, there have been instances and incidents where certain services from cloud providers, and it can be any cloud provider, not only AWS, GCP, or Azure, have been compromised. So the compromise that has happened has actually not happened, especially when it comes to AWS and the public cloud providers at their side. It has been because of certain things that the customers have kept open, so to speak, that have caused those security breaches. So that has to be kept in mind, because AWS as a company, for example, is so large that they can um, afford to recruit and hire a lot more security experts who will actually look at trying to break their systems internally and therefore enhance their security. Whereas if you have, let's say, 20 servers in your data center, you may not even afford to have a dedicated security uh, lead who can work on ensuring that your overall security is intact. So they have teams and teams of people who are just dedicated and focused on looking at that. But however, of course, it is people, so there are issues that may come up. But overall, in general, security is uh, increased in a cloud environment. Now, in terms of our next segment, in terms of how can cloud help you? So, like I mentioned earlier, there are two aspects to cloud, right? So, there is one aspect in terms of the usage of cloud. So you're not developing cloud per se, but you are using that to uh, help you in your work. So what are some of the areas that enterprises are looking at when it comes to their internal applications and environments? So obviously, the mobile applications, the mobile backends, and so on. A lot of them are now getting hosted on the cloud, internal web applications, intranet, extranet kind of applications are also hosted on cloud. Performance computing is another big area. In high performance computing, you need a very large number of compute, but probably in a for only for a limited time. And when it comes to procuring hardware for such a requirement, it can become a little expensive, and therefore, what is preferred is to use the scalability model of the cloud and scale quickly. So, if, for example, if you want to use 100 servers, let's say for to run some computations for 1 week, use the cloud and uh, procure 1,000 servers and do that in 1 day and then terminate it. So you only pay for that. Whereas for even for 1 week, if you have to procure 100 servers, you still need to buy that, and then after that 1 week, you are left with those servers. Application testing and QA. Sometimes companies testing an application QA on the cloud, but keep their production applications on prem due to certain regulatory or compliance requirements, especially in the banking and the financial sector. But even now, we are seeing a lot of the banking and financial sector applications slowly moving to the cloud. E-commerce sites, obviously, is another good example because of the fact that the usage of that application is not static. It peaks and dips depending on certain campaigns or certain times of the year, and that is ideal from a cloud perspective. Um, and then anything new that you want to quickly try out, put it out there, see it works. If it works, take it to the next level. If it doesn't, bring it down. So business services is ideal again. Um, and then DR and batch jobs again, because of the fact that you really don't need it until happens. So you keep a very small version of the DR site. You don't have to pay much, and obviously hoping that nothing happens and you never even need it would be an ideal scenario for a cloud environment. But overall, in practice, almost anything potentially can go to cloud, and we are seeing that a lot of aspects where we were seeing which were not suitable for cloud are now slowly getting migrated and used by cloud. There are certain things like, for example, mainframe applications and so on, which were built on a lot more older um, legacy application environment and technology cannot be directly have to re-engineer and re-architect to meet newer technologies that are available on the cloud. A lot of companies that we have seen, for example, Netflix is almost fully on the cloud, and based on their business model, and even recently where we saw a surge in their usage because of COVID. It was very easy for them to scale instead of procure they were on AWS. Emails, like I said earlier, all the Office 365, the emails, Outlook, and so on is all now on cloud, and that allows you to be able to synchronize and view your emails and applications and your solutions from various different devices as well. So, for example, if you even consider things like Netflix, where you can watch a certain program and then pause it halfway and then continue that program again on your mobile phone, for example, instead of your TV, all those are kind of built in from a cloud standpoint based on that functionality. Um, a lot of the banks now, checking your bank account balance from an app and so on. Again, that aspect of the application is on cloud. Social media is almost 100% on cloud, and a lot of the backup solutions now, a lot of us are using for even our personal use, like Google Drive and OneDrive. All of those are on the cloud. We don't have to procure separate physical devices anymore, like backup hard disks and so on. A lot of us now just directly back up most of our important things on the cloud, especially documents and so on. So that was, from a usability standpoint. Um, but the other one, of course, in terms of a very keen interest area, which I also personally am promoting is how can you leverage cloud and AWS from a career standpoint, right? So how can you become a cloud architect, cloud engineer, cloud developer, and even in other aspects, for example, in quality assurance QA, where you can be specialized in testing solutions that are on cloud. So there's a specific aspect of those also. So in terms of just some statistics, and I couldn't find any statistics from a Sri Lankan perspective, but uh, from an Indian perspective, which is very close to us, uh, geographically, where they are looking at about 1 million new cloud computing jobs that are going to be created by 2022 in a couple of years' time, right, in India. So our number may not be as high, but obviously it is going to be a lot more in Sri Lanka as well. And again, statistically, based on surveys that have happened, people who have cloud expertise and skills uh, can potentially earn up to 30% more than average market salaries for IT professionals. And then a lot of the work now uh, has a very big cloud dependency on it, right? So it is no longer sometimes becoming optional, even in companies where we are working. Uh, Even if you look at a developer, we are looking at, okay, can you develop an application that can be hosted or deployed on the cloud? So even a Java developer or a .NET developer, from a secondary standpoint, cloud skills are becoming almost mandatory now, if not the primary skill set. And then, of course, there are a lot of new markets that have opened up: data analytics, AI, and machine learning. And again, because of the scalability aspects of cloud, where we have that option to leverage the scalability of the vast amount of untapped hardware and resources that are available on the cloud. A lot of these things now have become possible, and a lot of new roles have kind of come up in the recent past. And statistically, I think even in reInvent this year, and as you mentioned, but only about 3% of the current IT infrastructure applications. So of course, it will go to 100%, but as you can see, there's a very big gap in terms of what is on cloud, what's on-prem, and a lot of large enterprise and companies are looking at cloud to use and migrate their applications, deploy new applications on the cloud to gain all these additional benefits. So the other thing, of course, is what does an individual need to do to gear themselves when it comes to the cloud itself. And certification is probably the best first approach. Getting one self-trained and certified in different areas and different specialties depending on their current skill set, as well as what they want to do in the future. So this is just a view of what AWS provides in terms of the certification options that are there. So um, you know there are a lot of training options, both locally and online, um, which should generally be considered before you go and sit for the certification exam. And companies like AWS and other companies also provide training material on their site, especially for companies that are partners with them. So you can check with your company if you're working for a partner company. If you're a partner of, let's say, AWS, your company, then a lot of the content, training content may be already available for free. And you have different levels and stages where you can get yourself trained and certified. So for example, at the bottom here, you can see that the foundation level, which is generally where they recommend that you have maybe 0 to 6 months of hands-on AWS experience. You can do the cloud practitioner certification, and the associate certification, which is the next level. A lot of people sometimes skip the cloud practitioner as well and directly go into the associate, which is fine. There is no requirement especially from AWS standpoint, where you need to do anything before you do one certification. There are no prerequisites for any of these certifications at all, so you can do anything, any of the certifications. But a lot of people start with the associate level certification, the solutions architect associate certification. Generally, I expect you to have, anywhere between 6 and 1 year of hands-on experience. But even without that, we have seen a lot of people getting certified who are fresh and don't have experience on hands-on project-based experience on AWS. But they just from a recommendation standpoint to ensure that there is a much better standpoint for you to pass the exam. They recommend about 1 year on average. So the solutions architect associate is what majority of the people start off with. If you have a sysops background, a system admin background, the sysops admin associate is a good first step. And if you're going to be developing applications for the cloud environment, then the developer associate is a good option as well. And then from there, the next level, which is the professional, is right now the top level of the AWS certifications. You can do the DevOps engineer professional. And for the professional certifications, their recommendation is at least about 2 years of hands-on experience, because those are very tough in terms of the exam itself. Again, they recommend that anyone who has done sysops admin or developer associate can do the DevOps engineer professional as the next step. But again, there is no prerequisite. You can do this directly without doing any of the associate exams as well. And then similarly for the solutions architect associate, the next level is solutions architect professional, and similar kind of expectation from a hands-on experience is expected there as well, roughly about 2 years. And then they have started a lot of these specialty certifications now, which are shown here on the right-hand side, which are kind of focused on very niche areas. So, for example, the advanced networking specialty is, an certification which is very much geared towards the networking aspect. So, network admins and so on would generally select that. Security is very much focused on the AWS security services, and a lot of CCSP kind of candidates would look at that as the next option as well. Machine learning, data analytics, Alexa, and database are again specific areas in for those particular. So depending on your career growth and your career aspirations of what areas that you want to pursue and what you are currently also doing, you can look at those aspects in terms of specializing in that. But again, what they recommend is if you go to the specific exam guides for each of these exams, for example, data analytics and machine learning, they have provided certain guidelines in terms of what they feel are the recommended experience that you have, that you should have before you kind of start off and start looking at sitting for these certification exams. And I think in Sri Lanka specifically, before COVID, you had to schedule your certification exams uh, at an exam provider, at an exam center, where you go and sit for the exam. You schedule it, you pay for it, and then sit for that exam at their premises. But due to COVID, they have now given the option for a remote, exam proctoring that happens from home. So, for example, if you have a laptop with a webcam and so on, you can actually do the exam completely from your home. You don't have to go out. So, there is a process, and all of that is well documented in the exam as well. Yeah, I think that's about it from me. So I just wanted to kind of highlight, that especially for people who are looking at taking up cloud AWS as a career option, you can always connect with me offline as well, and we can discuss in terms of what they need to do to take their career to the next level. My contact details are available on the screen now. Thanks, and wanted to just open up now for Q&A.
Yes, everybody. So thank you very much, Mr. Hussain, for the insightful speech and the discussion and your knowledge sharing session for about Q&A about the cloud computing and specifically about the brand that you are specializing in. So as we have come to the end of today's session, I would like to invite those who have questions to come forward. You can either unmute your mic. I mean, you can just raise your hand and virtually, or unmute your mic, or actually you can also type on the chat window to ask if you have any questions right now. If anybody has questions, you can type on the chat window, or you can also note down Mr. Hussain's contact details, and you can contact him via email as well later on.
I was just checking on the chat if there is any questions, but
Yeah,
right now I don't see anything, right?
Yeah, there's none.
Okay.
All right. So, Mr. Hussain, can I ask you a question, like question?
Sure, definitely.
All right. So this actually might not be specifically about cloud computing, but now we have some students here, so we have some alumni as well, recent graduates here as well, and they have studied computer science, software engineering, computer something in computer related. But now you suggested certain career path in cloud computing in certain specialization that you mentioned about. To be a cloud computing specialist in the future, do you think any other add-ons? Because now there are so many other approaches in IT, such as, I mean, data science is something that is really big, and they're working really hard on gathering data, and then at the end integration happens. That's also on cloud. So do you think knowing just like fundamentals about cloud computing would be enough? But do you think if they could also gather some sort of knowledge in other platforms, like other avenues, such as data science and maybe like like cyber security, things like that, do you think that will help them enable even more doorways when it comes to career growth, along with cloud computing?
Yeah, so definitely when at cloud overall, right? Cloud is an enabler for most every aspect of an IT professional's career, and a lot of these new age aspects like data and analytics, AI, data science, like you mentioned, even even areas like cybersecurity have become a lot more prevalent because of cloud. For example, if you were doing a large scale computation in data science, the amount of hardware that you had at your disposal was much less earlier, especially if you want to try out certain concepts and so on your own, right? And now even individuals, regardless, even not even companies, but even individuals can now start looking at doing cloud and data science and those aspects. So having said that, some of the concepts of things like data science, data and analytics have to be well understood as well. So those are not concepts that have come across because of cloud.
Yes.
So it is always that they also look at those areas, in terms of data science, data analytics, and so on. So there are, there are certain separate courses and so on. And I think in some cases there are even certain degree certifications and so on that go degrees and programs that go with those. And then cloud can be used as an enabler, to ensure that you can get quick access to infrastructure to support that. So yeah, definitely, I think having a background in those areas or learning those areas, like for example, if you take a developer, a Java or .NET developer, that person would gain a lot by trying to test out their personal cloud skills quickly, or the personal development skills quickly on the
That's
cloud. So cloud would always be an enabler, but in a very specific area. For example, like where it comes to cloud architect and infrastructure related work, then you are looking at people who select cloud as a career in that specific area, and for that you need to have a breadth of skills as opposed to a depth of skills.
exactly. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I asked, because like we see this happening in, I mean, even like software engineering careers as well, because I mean, just after you graduate, you can do a certain thing, right? But then again, you will need to update yourself. So something like that, I think in any career in
Right.
IT, I think updation is quite required, I suppose. Okay.
That's right.
There is a question for you on the
Yes.
chat.
Okay. Why would one choose AWS over Azure? Okay. So in a lot of cases, we generally try to minimize kind of uh, uh, pushing or suggesting one cloud over the other. Um, a lot of times, it depending on the customer, especially in a corporate context. For example, Microsoft Azure or Microsoft in general are very prevalent in terms of the desktop, the Windows, and the enterprise solutions that they have with customers. And they provide very good discounts from a costing standpoint compared to, let's say, for example, AWS for their existing enterprise customers. So you would there is no very specific answer to when you would choose AWS versus Azure, but you need to look at what exactly you are trying to achieve overall, and then what is the platform that would allow you to achieve that in the fastest, the easiest, and the least costly manner. And if you and from a cost perspective, especially when it comes to companies, it is not the cost that is generally published on the vendor's website that you need to consider. You can always talk to the cloud providers and figure out what is the best pricing that they can give you for the requirement that you have. But having said that, the first step before you come up to the cloud itself, the cost itself, is to look at what is it that you are trying to do, what are the services or the solutions or the components that you need for that. So, for example, if you're doing a lot of analytics and machine learning kind of uh, solutions, does AWS have a lot of those solutions which will make it easy for you already, baked, pre-baked, or does Azure have better services? So you have to go down to one more level of detail in terms of what you are trying to achieve. Now, a lot of people generally generalize, saying that, for example, if you have a Microsoft application, you go to Azure. If you have a standard infrastructure requirement, you go to AWS. If you have a data or a search or analytics type of application, you go to GCP. That used to be probably true maybe 3-4 years back, but now all the cloud providers have almost very similar services across the board. And it then comes up, especially from a corporate perspective, it comes up to a lot in terms of the pricing and the discount level that companies offer, the vendors offer to companies based on their existing relationship with the customer. AWS started predominantly targeting the startups because they wanted uh, to to make it easier for the startups to have environments for their requirements. Microsoft took a slightly different approach. They started looking at enterprises where they were already in touch with the IT departments, and that was how you could potentially start looking at having a lot of their application enterprise applications on the cloud. So that would be from an individual company standpoint. But again, looking at it from an individual standpoint, should I do an AWS certification or should I do an Azure certification? Um, if you don't have any um, kind of background at all and any kind of inclination in your workspace, even now at your workplace, then I personally, from my bias perspective, would suggest AWS. But for example, if you see that your company is doing a lot of Azure work, and doing a lot of projects on Azure overall, then you can look at Azure as an overall first step.
Okay, right. We have two more questions, one from Zainab and another from Akash. So we take the first question.
Sure. What advice would you give to young graduates who want to pursue a career in cloud? Yeah. So like I mentioned, there are two ways of looking at cloud. A lot of people like to start off with the basics like the associate certification, and then go one or two levels into that same infrastructure like AWS, for example. In another context where again individuals have um, no specific requirement as such from their companies, it can also help them to get at least maybe two cloud vendors. So for example, you could start off with one AWS certification and then maybe one Azure certification to do your next one. But again, it depends on what you're trying to achieve, because what happens is when you do certifications in one track or with one customer, you're becoming more focused and dedicated in that cloud provider, and that will help you in one aspect of the game. And then of course, if you a lot of companies are no longer looking at only one cloud vendor from their enterprise standpoint, because they don't want to put all their eggs in one basket. A lot of companies are looking at mitigating the risk by looking at multi-cloud, where they would have two or more cloud providers, which complicates the infrastructure to a big extent as well. But that if you have multiple certifications and skills in multiple areas, that would help you from a career standpoint as well.
Okay. Well, another question says, do AWS also provide certification at low cost, free certification vouchers due to COVID?
Okay, so I don't know from an individual standpoint. I may have to look that up. I haven't come across any low cost or free certification vouchers that AWS has provided. What they did was, because I work with them very closely, especially on the certification side. I have got about internally within the company, or 1,500 people certified based on the programs that I have run on AWS in the last 2 years or so. Um, what they have done is they have allowed and made a lot of trainings available for free on their what they call the APN portal, which is something where you get access to if you are a partner. Um, they are providing a lot of workshops and free trainings of that nature. Recently, they allowed a 50% discount for their certifications, um, for a set number of, I think you had to buy a minimum of 50 certifications. And they also provided, I think, close to, 200 plus certifications for free, for the advanced, the professional, and the specialty, again, from a corporate and a company perspective. So I'm not sure from an individual perspective, Akash, but from a company perspective, yes, they are offering a lot, especially in terms of COVID now, and especially in the last 3 to 6 months. They have provided these free and discounted certification vouchers options.
Okay. Right. So if anybody else also has questions, you can ask on the chat, or you can speak up. We can give you about a few more minutes to see whether you want something clarified, or you can always speak to him and write to him through the email addresses displayed on the screen and the LinkedIn profile as well. Mr. Hussain, since there are no other questions, shall we conclude?
Sure. Thanks again, Varuna, and thanks everyone for joining. And like I said, if you have any questions further down the line or any advice that you all need, please feel to contact contact me, email or these days LinkedIn is kind of a very good option. So we'll connect back with you as soon as possible. Thanks everyone, and
Okay.
have a good weekend.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Hussain, as well. So thank you, everyone, for participating as well. So being part of this Learn About webinar series. And we'll be having more sessions like this. We have more coming up about data science and certain other topics as well, not just in IT, but in multiple different aspects too. So we'll be notifying you through email and also on our social media. This session has also been streamed online on our Facebook page. I just sent you this link. You can go there and just rewatch anytime you want, and yeah, as well if you like to. Okay, so we'll see you again once again, maybe in 2 weeks' time. And until then, have a good weekend and have a good time as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Varna. Thanks again to IIT for arranging these sessions. Have a good day.
Thank you so
Bye.
much as well. Thank you.